The following presentation was recorded live at the Richmond Marriott in Richmond, Virginia for the 29th Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers Convention. This is tape number 21, Voice 3, Caller Coach.
Let's talk a little bit about what we want to accomplish here today. This is the first one of these sessions that we've ever had. And you guys are coaches, right? Have I got that right? And so you've had experience over the course of your careers trying to help callers learn what they're supposed to do. You're welcome to stay if you're not, but this is supposed to be a coaching session. This is for caller coaches. I'm supposed to be talking to y'all about how to help young callers to sing properly. So, bye. So, let me ask you again, will you all just kind of mosey on up here forward a little bit, and let's try to make some sense out of this, since none of us have done this before. And I'm going to start out in a kind of an informal way. Thank you. I'm going to... Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about some of the things that you run up against when you're trying to work with new callers. Let's talk just a little bit. What happens? Anybody? Nothing happens. I see. So right off the bat, I can tell you that one I can't help.
Paul, my experience in coaching, I'm vastly approaching 80 schools now, and I have always solicited the assistance of a qualified vocal coach from the Frankfurt, Germany area. I'm from Germany, and I found that I am not an expert in vocal instruction, and I don't want to damage anything that could possibly be damaged. So I have always had a person on staff that was qualified, Jean Conard. I don't know if you have ever recognized her. She's been over there for years. Very, very competent, very good, and she understands the needs of a caller as well as you do. She's been working with us for about 25 years. So that's where I'm coming from. I would like to be able to release her to do something else if that's what the intent of this session is.
I think that's possible. Any other comments? Yeah.
I want to be able to understand what I've been trying to teach callers for many years, and I think you are the perfect one to help me to understand.
I'll do my best at that. Any other comments? If you're worried.
Yeah, I'm not a caller coach yet, but all the lady callers that I meet want to know how to lower their voice, and I need to know how to help them without hurting them.
There are pills that you can take, operations.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I know how I did it.
Yeah, yeah. Or start smoking, one or the other. Well, I mean that facetiously, you all know that. So what you're concerned about is that when you get a caller, callers have some weaknesses. Help me talk to me about what the weaknesses of young callers are. Everybody sort of seems to imply that they already know that I know what I'm talking about here. But I need some help. I have some ideas about what you confront. But one of the things I'm going to guess, since you're not telling me, is that you end up with callers that are a little nervous or timid. And so they don't project their voice as well. That's one of the things that they worry about. Of course, with a microphone, you don't have to project that well anyhow, but you have to have a certain quality in your voice that is commanding. And to figure out how to make that commanding is one of your tasks. Another problem that you run up against is that callers run out of breath. And that's also a function of being nervous. Here's another hand or comment.
One of the things, you say if we're using a microphone we don't have to project well, but one of the things that happens is that if people don't project well, they turn up the microphone, then they get feedback, then they're afraid to project, and then the whole cycle goes around again. So we need to stop the cycle.
Yes, that's a really good comment.
I guess one of the things I'd be interested in, because when I coach callers, I tell them everything I know about voice. because that doesn't take me very long.
5 seconds.
But I give them what I know about abominable breathing. Starting with how not to spell it. And about opening their mouth properly and where the sound is formed and all that. Again, like others have said, trying to get them a little help without getting into real trouble. So one of the things I'd like to get, if you could, is what are the basics that we can give people without our having to be fully qualified for it. The second question I have, while I still have the mic, is one of the problems that occasionally I'll get, and I have the most problem with getting to help the student, is occasionally I get people that are a little off pitch. The pitch is bad, off key. But on occasion, and I can bring them back in, but twice I've had people that are so far out. One I got close, one there was no hope, and I've had various tricks about trying to bring it in, but if you can have some additional things of getting people on key that are real problems, that's an extreme thing, and I'd rather have you work with the general first. But
That's good. Did he sort of put into voice what are your concerns and your interests? All right. That being the case, I sort of suspected that, but I wondered, I was going to sort of lay them out individually. But we've talked about some of the things that have come up have to do with being able to hit pitch. Another thing that's come up has to do with what are the basic functions of the singing voice and how can you teach it properly. But I'd like to go a step farther than that if I can. And we'll find out if I can. And that is to try to assist you in your diagnosis of what's wrong, so that when you see or hear something, you have a pretty good sense about what it is that you're listening to and what the problem might be. So in a very small way, this is a little bit like Auto Mechanics 101, where you say this is a piston and this is good. That's right. It is kind of like that. So let's start off with the very first and most fundamental thing about singing, which is posture. In the simplest terms, the old church song, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, that little children learn how to sing, fits for callers as well, except with the modification that when a person stands up and their posture is right, then their ears will line up over their shoulder points, shoulders over the hips, hips over the ankles. Maybe the knees will line up there somewhere too, but not necessarily, depending on the way a person stands. But the most important thing is that people become sensitive to the gravitational pull on their body. And I'll bet you, we're all going to stand up here in a second, I'll bet you there's not a single one of you, there's not a single one of us that has the posture that we ought to have to be able to sing. At first I'm going to get you into the right posture, and then I'm going to tell you why that posture is important. So everybody stand up. And I'm going to see, we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Perfect. We've got people to help each other. Here's what I want you to try to do. And this is also a way where you can teach it to people who have no introduction to this point of thing. I want you to close your eyes so that you're not orienting yourself any other way except internally. I want you to just rock a little bit forward until you're ready to fall over, and rock back until you're ready to fall over, and keep doing that like a pendulum until you finally hit the point where you're gravitationally balanced. Most of us don't think about gravitational balance anymore, and so we find ourselves in very peculiar postures. We've held ourselves in odd places for so long that we no longer are sensitive to it. All right, now, with you folks that are right over here, let's see, no, you can open up. Lane, would you work here with Frank? Lonnie, would you work? What you're looking for, turn, look at him sideways on. You're all lined up, are you, Frank? Yes. Does it feel like it?
I'm not going back and forth.
All right, you quit rocking. Good. That has more to do with his psychological state than his gravitational balance. Yeah. Okay, so now, if Frank's posture is correct, each one of you do that with each other. Will you just size each other up and see if you get your ears over your shoulders and your shoulders over your hips, and if your hips are lined up with your ankles. Yeah. Okay. So talk to each other. Take turn and look at each other. No, you got. I didn't say anything about stomachs.
I remember what I couldn't believe. This has gotten smaller in my. No, I don't want to.
All right. So how are you doing? Did you get? Have you? Of course, with women that have long hair, it's a little harder to see where their ears are. Now let's see. I'm Betsy. Now let's turn around. Let's see, Paul. Let's see how you line up. Every person so far that I'm looking at suffers from the same problem. Yeah, your ears, our heads are too far forward on our shoulders. No, yeah, you just need to have an operation to change the position of your ears. No, the truth is that we all spend too much time sitting in casual furniture. And so we haven't learned what it is to stand up tall. The muscles that have to do with that are located in our backs underneath our shoulder blades. And most of us are really casual about that. So I'm going to use Frank as a model. Yeah. Yes. So first thing I'm going to do is get Frank's posture right. He won't like it, but I'm going to get Frank's posture right. And then I'm going to explain to you why it's important. As you all look at Frank, you can see that his head is forward on his shoulders so that his ears, just to line them up for you, Frank, there are your ears, there's your shoulder. So his ears are about 2 inches forward. And that's really significant. Yeah, Frank's trying to figure out how in the world to do that. And you're actually succeeding. You're moving in the right direction. And he's using the right approach to that, too, because generally, when a person tries to correct the problem of their head being too far forward, all they do is rock their head back, tighten the neck muscles, and that's the wrong solution. Frank, instead, is trying to elevate his whole torso. And here's a way that you can help people to do that. If I'm going to put my hand at the back of Frank's neck, I'm going to try to see there's a point at the back of your skull and at the top of your spine. Stretch them far apart. Stretch them apart. He says, okay, now I'm not going to spend the rest of my life that way. With that neck long, now I'm going to put my hand at the back of Frank's neck and ask Frank to push back against my neck, but not shorten your neck. Stretch, stretch. You're almost done. Now you keep trying to tighten your neck muscles. Just leave your neck long. Okay, now Frank says, first off, I'm going to fall over backwards because he feels like his gravitational center is shifted, and it indeed has shifted. Okay, now you see that his ears are right over his shoulders. The only challenge that's facing him now is that his shoulders are a little back from his hips, so that the upper part of his body is kind of militaristic in its rigidity, but it's rolled back behind. And over a period of time, that'll make some of the muscles in Frank's back and neck and the back of his legs tired, and so he won't adopt this posture. Okay, push back against me a little bit. There you are. Good. Now, let me tell you why all of this is important. First, you saw that in order for Frank to get where he needed to be, he wasn't just tinkering with his head on his shoulders, on his neck. Instead, the whole upper part of his torso shifted to make that possible. And Frank, you felt some tug right here in the small of your back, just below your shoulder blades. Isn't that right?
Yes.
All right. Now, could you manage to stand in that posture for any length of time? No. Yes, actually you could, but not for very long, because all of us are being adult for more than we'd like to admit, for more years than we'd like to admit, have some pretty deeply ingrained habits. As the result of that, our bodies will ache if we go into different kinds of posture. However, it's still worth it, and here's the reason why. The first one having to do with the posture of his head on his shoulders. There are some muscles that attach right behind Frank's ear. That's the mastoid process. And there's suspensory muscles that come down and they attach to the bone just above the larynx. And when you stand tall like that, the larynx is the voice box, the place where the sound is produced. So as you stand in this kind of posture, those ligaments and muscles stretch and hold the larynx in an absolutely erect posture. If, on the other hand, I collapse and allow my head to drop forward, then the space between the mastoid process and the hyoid bone shrinks, and the hyoid and the whole larynx has a tendency to sort of fold forward. So it sits right at the top of the trachea, The trachea is the place where the breath is delivered to the vocal folds, and in a very small way, you just kind of put a bend in the tube just before you go to make the sound. And so that being the case, sound production becomes more complicated. Whereas when you stand up tall, the whole alignment of the vocal tract is cleaner, the sound is easier to produce. It doesn't get a crimp in it. Okay, so that's one of the first reasons why this erect posture is important. The second reason has to do with breathing. And when we stand in a collapse, you guys can sit down for a second. Now, Frank says, that's hard to do. That's hard to do. It will be hard for each one of you. And as time permits, I'll try to assist each one of you in finding that posture so you know what it feels like. It's very hard to teach it to somebody else if you don't know what it feels like. That little statement that I made to Frank about the tug of the muscles in the lower part of his back below his shoulder blades, I learned that from my own personal experience by correcting my own posture and going, good heavens, how did I get there, and what muscles? And about an hour and a half later, they told me which ones they were that were being used in strange ways because they started to ache. And I had to sort of figure that out. Second thing that I was going to describe to you, apart from the position of the head on the shoulders, is that when you elevate the upper part of your torso, when you take the thoracic part with the rib cage part and get it lined up right, then you've just lifted 20 or 30 pounds of bone off of your diaphragm. When you stand with a collapsed sternum, with the rib cage falling down, then all of the actions of the diaphragm begin to be inhibited because the space in which it works is compressed. When you get the rib cage properly elevated, then it lifts all of that bony structure away and makes the space in which the diaphragm works bigger. And it's easier then to inhale and exhale. Those are the two primary functions of singing, breathing and phonating, making sound. And so the posture influences both of those things. Okay, now, we're going to have a bit of a lineup here. I think we're going to go back here against the back wall, and I'm going to show you a way that you can work with your callers to get them there. Okay, everybody, we're going to have the lineup. One of the ways that I worked with Frank was to place my hand behind his neck, but now you have the access to the wall. Yeah, you're going to have to lean against that wall or find another wall somewhere where, it's not a solid wall. None of them are. All right, well, then we're going to go to the front of the room here because there's a solid outside wall there. Everybody find yourself a solid wall. Oh, and you know what? It's got a chair rail around it. That's going to make it really interesting. We're not going to be able to successfully do this with everybody. Yeah, doors would be fine too. Mirrors, all right, wherever you can. Now what you need to do is to find a way to get your back up against the wall. This is the part that may be a little difficult, and that is put your heels up against the wall. And then, some of you say, but I protrude too much out the back end, and now just stretch back until your head, and you think, holy cow, I didn't realize I was that far forward. Yeah, it's hard to do, isn't it? You can feel the pain in that, can't you?
I sure can.
All right. The lower back really complains about that. Yeah, good. Now, I'm going to come over here to Randy. Everybody look over here at Randy. You see the solution for Randy to get his head to the wall?
My chin's too far back.
Yeah, now your necks need to be long. But you see, Randy has developed a fairly significant set of, his musculature in the back of his neck is strong because it's been holding him in a forward position for a long time. Now, keep your neck long, and now figure out a way to get back to there. Come on, keep coming, keep coming. Oh, it's hard, isn't it? Except that he doesn't have to go any farther than that, because you can see that his ears are now lined up over his shoulders, and the reason that he can't go up against the wall is because his shoulders are so broad here at the back. So this may not always work, but it's one of the tools that you have. Knees should be bent. Yeah, you've got the same problem, don't you?
Yes.
Susan has the same challenge. With broad shoulders, her head won't comfortably go back, and there you go. They will go back. You have to really stretch, though, don't you? Yeah. Okay, come away from the wall. That's one way that you can do that with a whole bunch of folks. Then you just walk around. That's right. And that's hard. That's hard. The back of the shoulders, that's correct.
Is that a good exercise?
Yes, absolutely. To correct lower back troubles. Yeah, you betcha. Okay, come on back down. You notice that not everybody could do that. Not everybody was supposed to do that. But that's one way when you've got a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people. It's pretty time-consuming to go around and hold them at the back of the head and try to get them to stretch long. Well, I'm going to demonstrate this for you so that you can see what should be happening. First, my casual posture. With my head, see where my head is in relationship to my shoulders. Yeah. Now, I first stretch my neck to where it's comfortably long, and then I work to raise myself into an elevated position. And you can see that the vast majority of that work had very little to do with my head. It had everything to do with my torso. Had everything to do with the upper part of my torso. And now, I just rock myself back and forth until I find my center of gravity. And that would take somebody like Frank, whose shoulders were thrust back behind his hips. By playing that game, he'd say, oh gosh, yeah, I'm ready to tip over backwards. There I am. Okay, and pretty soon, you can find an internal balance to help that locate for the singer. Then you say, gosh, you've been out of that posture for a long time. How are you going to get into it? By asking them on a regular basis to adopt this posture. While they're in your collar school, every session that you open with a posture alignment session. It will only take you about 10 minutes to get it started the first time, and then every time thereafter it will become progressively shorter, where you just simply say, okay, help each other find that good posture, move there. Now hold it there for 10 minutes. Stay in that position for 10 minutes. Everybody will relax at the end of 10 minutes and be grateful that you don't hold them there longer. But the next time you come back, it's 12 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. You go on and do other things, of course, but while they're in that position. And then you say to them, this is self-monitoring. You have to figure out how to do this. Here are the benefits that come to you. It aligns your throat so that you can sing more readily. It aligns your breathing so that you can get access to your breath more readily. If you want the benefits of those two things, then you'll want to do it. Oh, and incidentally, it will help you remove lower back pain. It will help you remove stress pain in your shoulders, in your neck. So even if you never, ever sing a tip again in your life, if you want to feel better, then figure out how to change your posture. And while you're doing this, every time you go to practice, hold that posture. Rest of the day, you can be as sloppy as you want to. But whenever you go to sing, hold that posture. Can't hold it for the whole dance? Then hold it for a tip. Hold it for 2 tips. Do it every other tip so that your body gets a chance to relax and not get stiff. But over a period of time, the muscles that are controlling that new posture will become accustomed to it. And I'm not talking about years. I'm talking about a matter of weeks into short number of months before those muscles will become strong enough to adopt the new posture. And as they do that, they will say, I feel so much better when I'm in this posture. I hurt less at the end of the day. My voice works better. The motivation will have to be their own ultimately. Long since they've left your school, they won't have this as a habit. But if you can help them adopt that as a motive, that they'll sing better, they'll breathe better, and their back pains and their neck pains will be diminished, then they will feel better about it and they'll ultimately adopt it. So they go from 3 minutes holding it to 5 minutes to adopting it for a tip, to adopting it for every other tip, to the first half of the dance, to the whole dance, to all day long. You understand what I'm saying? It gradually works their way into their lives. If you ask them to do it that way, rather than saying, this is the posture you should adopt, stay there for the rest of your lives, nobody does it. It's like, in a small way, it's like quitting smoking. You just don't do that very much. There are very few people who all of a sudden just quit. But people evolve into a new way of thinking about themselves. Question?
Do the heels go against the wall as well?
Yes, they do, as much as you can. As we get older, our physiology changes and we pick up extra poundage behind and in front sometimes. But for those who pick up extra poundage behind, then trying to get your shoulder and your head to the wall around a big butt is really hard to do. And so you just watch. And if people are doing abnormal things, then invite them to take their heels away from the wall a little bit. The problem with doing that too readily is that when you get your heels away from the wall, you never really do have to straighten out your back. You can push your back against the wall with your feet 6 or 8 inches away and give the semblance of being standing up tall. But the truth is that until your feet are underneath you, you're not really standing up tall. There's a question back here.
You said that your knees are slightly bent, too.
That's correct. You don't want to teach people to make stiff knees. By makeup, I have a small sway back. And so, for me, if I don't lengthen my spine down, then my rear end sticks out and blocks a lot. So I have to stretch the lower part of my back as well. But, you know, everybody comes to that. The issue at hand here is getting the neck long, the head back, the chest elevated. This is the singer's posture. It's called the noble posture, where your sternum is high, but it's high not because you pull your shoulders back militaristically or because you sway your back to get there. Rather, it becomes high just in the process of standing up tall. And that noble posture with the elevated chest, with the neck long and back, the head over the shoulders, is by far the best position for a person to sing in. Okay? That's one of the simple things you can teach. It's really simple. You felt it. It isn't hard to do. It's hard to adopt as a habit.
Just a tip, Arden, and as far as working with callers, when I was working on learning diaphragm breathing, you said that maybe every other tip or something. It works out for me that each tip has a patter call section and a singing call. Patter call takes too much mental concentration, and I couldn't diaphragm breathe. But on the singing calls, there wasn't as much going on, so I would focus on singing call as the time to concentrate on breathing or the body work.
That's a very wise plan, but it's the notion that you do it for a while and you let them off the hook. You do it for a while, you let them off the hook. Okay, now let's move on to the next part of that. You tell this I'm talking to you about, you just take a look at it by observation. You notice that we had everybody stand up and there wasn't a single person in the whole room whose posture was ideal. Everybody had fallen into casual habits. Mostly the casual habits had to do with the head standing forward on the shoulders, and that meant a collapsed area in and around the larynx. The collapse or in and around the larynx is going to be one of those things that will cause a singer to have to work harder than they ought to have to work. Okay? So posture we start with. The second thing that we're going to talk about, and this could go either way. You can make your own choices. You can either now start talking about breathing, or you can talk about making sound. They're interrelated. They're two sides of the same coin, and you have to talk about both sides before you get any sense about it. I like to start to talk about how to make sound, because that's what people really want to do. And then, after I've taught people how to make sound properly, then I go to how do you provide the wind power so that you can make the sound that you want to make. Lots of voice teachers go exactly backwards in that, and they start with breathing exercises, and then they go to how to make the sound. I don't like that because these breathing exercises have no context. And so you do all of these things, but they're doing them and they don't see the connection. And so my pattern over the years is to start with the sound and then move backwards to how do you get the breath going to give you the sound you want. What sound do you want? There are 3 different kinds of sounds. One of them is pressed. That's what most people do. Most Americans speak and sing with a pressed quality. I'll just demonstrate what a pressed quality is. It's kind of pinched in the throat. It's tight. It's controlled, but it's kind of focused. I'm exaggerating, of course, but it's not very fun to listen to because it makes me sound like I'm angry or that I'm nervous or that my underwear is too tight. So at any rate, that sense of having release there in the throat is the first thing that most folks have to work with. So, tightness, that's pretty normal. How do you produce that sound yourself so you can feel it? I've demonstrated this before in other sessions. Make a glottal stop in your throat, several of them, and then sustain that sound. I'll do it, then I'll ask you to do it. You do it. What are the sensations that are associated with that? Name them for yourselves. Talk them out loud, but you're naming them for yourselves. Because I'll tell you what you hear in a moment, but you need to tell me what you feel while you're doing that. Because when you hear a sound, you need to have already felt in your body how to produce that sound so that when you say to that person, I hear a certain quality, and based upon that, what I hear, I'm assuming that these are the feelings that you get. And when they start nodding their head, then that's a way that you can tell that you've diagnosed it properly. Okay? So what do you feel when you make that sound?
I'm not quite sure, actually.
Be thinking about it, testing it out. Frank, what do you hear? What do you feel?
I agree. I wasn't really paying attention to it.
Now it's time to do it again then. You're going to try to figure it out for yourselves. Here you go. Okay.
Well, I feel it here.
Yes, and when, for the benefit of the people who are in the tape, you're making a circle around your throat, right around your larynx.
Exactly.
Is that it?
Yes, that is it.
Anything else, Frank?
No,
There's a little flutter.
Tight. Feels tight.
Feels tight.
I feel vibration here.
In your throat. You feel vibration in your throat. Now you're going to, yes, you've got some other comments here.
I feel a little like pull
Tightness.
towards the eustachian tubes up towards my ears.
That's right. Does anybody else have that sensation where there's a kind of a movement up toward the behind your ear? Incidentally, that's a muscle that attaches at the mastoid process come down here. Okay? And I won't bother you with the name of it. It's just a muscle that goes back that way and suspends the larynx. Okay. Anything else that anybody wants to say? Yes.
I'm getting a little bit of a buzz.
On the bridge of your nose.
On the bridge of my nose, and I'm also feeling my pelvic muscles pushing up.
Yeah, the abdominal muscles are contracting, aren't they? Okay, so the sense of a tight sound, you can hear it, but you'll describe it as some sort of compression that's going on right here underneath the chin, in the throat. It's usually associated with some sort of sympathetic sound vibrations on the lower side of the cheekbones or across the bridge of the nose. In other words, it has an intensity about it. It has a focus to it. This has a focus to it, but it's also very edgy. It doesn't sound friendly. It doesn't sound relaxed. It sounds tight. And the truth is that it is tight. And it's made tight by two things that happen. One of which is that the muscles that control the opening and the closing of the vocal folds are contracting to where the vocal folds are being pinched and pressed against each other very tightly. I've used the image of a balloon that doesn't have enough air in it. And you have to really pinch the neck of the balloon in order for any sound to get out. That's a very common sensation. And it sounds just like a pinched balloon. It sounds tight.
Are what you're calling the vocal folds what we've always called the vocal cords?
They are the same thing. In classical singing, they're called folds because they are actually like folds of flesh. They're more complicated than that. They're also known by the name of the vocal bands. And they get that name because the inside edge of the vocal folds is a ligament that looks like a rubber band. Okay, but it's a complex structure, vocal cords. There's nothing cord-like in the vocal folds, but nevertheless, that they have those three names. They're kind of interchangeable. The other thing that happens is that the muscles that are embedded inside the vocal folds, which are used to produce intense sounds, they have it when the fibers fire there. They take the length of the vocal fold and they shorten the fold and they thicken the fold, and those muscles are involved. So the muscles that compress toward the center and make it possible for a phonation to happen are overactive. And the second thing is that the muscles inside the vocal folds have a tendency to become overactive, and they make the cords stiff so that they won't vibrate freely. Part of the reason that happens is because the vocal folds are trying to make compensation for inadequacy of airflow. You get too little breath, you have to pinch to make do with what you've got. But people have done that for so many years that they don't make the association between those two things. All they know is that they make this tight sound. That's one thing you have to watch out for. The second thing that you have to watch out for is breathy sounds. And when people are unsure of themselves and a little timid or frightened, this is a very common solution to the problem. It's to say, please don't hurt me. We make non-aggressive sounds when we feel nervous. And so we say with our body, timidity, humility. You know, we have a pecking order in our society, and we don't bow down to each other particularly, but we do it a lot with the sounds that we make. And so early on, callers will have a tendency to sound timid. And
what are the characteristics of the sound that you hear me making right now? Breathy, yeah. Diffused. Any other things? There are some positive things about this sound. It's friendly. It's inviting. Certainly not commanding. It's my way of saying, I want to be friends with you. I don't want you to be unhappy with me. And so I will be gentle with you. Right? You ever try to do that with 8 squares out on the floor? I want all of you to like me. I don't want to offend anyone. And it doesn't work, does it? They don't want that kind of a sound.
A caller that would go like, square through 4. You like, do they really, is that, do you want me to square through 4? You know, as opposed to a square through 4, it's kind of like, please, square through 4?
Exactly, and you do that with a tone of voice. If it's all the same to you, if you don't mind, would you do a square through 4? But if you don't, do something else. Have a good time. Chaos, that happens. Okay, neither one of those two extremes are what you want. You want to find something in between those. So the breathy one you need to experience for yourselves. So will you please sigh for me? Make that breathy sound. Ah, ah, ah. Count to 5 in that sort of gentle voice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What are the sensations that go along with it? What does it feel like? You run out of breath. You leak a lot, don't you? Yeah. What else? But there are some other sensations that go along with it. You're trying to be self-analytical so that you can know what your body does, because what your body does, your coaches will do. And if you can feel it, if you can empathize with it in your own body, you have a greater chance of inviting them into a different environment, because they will know that you understand. If you tell them to do things and it doesn't make any sense to their body, their likelihood is that they will not respond. But if you can speak with some sort of personal experience that says, I know where you are, and this is how you get from where you are to where you need to be, they will be much more inclined to follow along. So, what does that breathy sound feel like?
The one thing that I felt was because there was more air going through, it was more of a drying effect for me.
Any other comments? You could feel the air moving through, couldn't you? Now compare that to the tight sound, the glottal sound. Now the loose sound. You need to find words in your own vocabulary to describe the differences between those several things. I'm looking for my bottle of water. Oh, thanks. Have you got some ideas about how to describe that to yourselves?
Difference in command and request? Would that be the difference in command and request?
Is that how it comes out toward you? That would be a see, you've now found a personalized way to say that. And some individuals would know exactly what you're talking about. Some would sort of miss it, and so it'd be nice to have more tools in your tool bag to pull out than that. But that's a very personalized way of saying it that would immediately help somebody to understand. And if you were to say that to them and say, no, don't request, command, they would automatically know how to make these adjustments in their voices. And that's why it's so personal that you find out your own way of saying that. The intermediate way is the way that you keep your throat as relaxed as it was when you were sighing, but that you bring the breath energy up to make that work. Here we go. Whereas is tight and ha is breathy, the silent H, a non-attacking vowel, like you were just settling yourself into a warm bath. Yeah. Then that's another way that you can do it. Those 3 sounds are the common options. They're not fixed points on a compass, however. They are progressive from way breathy to kind of breathy to balanced to kind of tight to very tight. And so, therefore, it's really important that you listen with good ears. What are you listening for? What do you hear when I make a tight sound? What do you hear? Speak up. What do you hear? You hear some strain. There are some other qualities there that are positive. Because somebody adopts this sound not just because I'm going to find the most negative thing I can do with my voice, but because it has some positives to it. What are the positives?
There's a sharpness that makes it...
A clarity.
That adds, sharpness that gives clarity. Yeah.
Exactly so. Is that what you were going to say also?
More treble instead of bass.
That's right. It's higher frequency.
There is more command.
Yes. So there are obvious reasons why people would adopt that. It has some positive elements to it. It just carries with it some negative elements, doesn't it? The negative elements are that it sounds edgy, tight, drawn in. Okay, now, what's the positive about this? What do you hear? What do you hear? It's friendly. What else? What are the qualities of this sound? Soothing. That's an excellent adjective. Pardon?
I said soothing.
Oh, you were the one that said soothing. Okay. Yeah. Soothing. That's a very good reason to do it. And so if you're wanting to reassure somebody, this is a good quality to have. Yeah, well, the microphone helps. But if I were to take the microphone away, you wouldn't be able to hear it so well. And that's its weakness, is that it has no command to it. It has no power, projectability. Oh, the other one. Yes, the tighter side, you can hear better. Absolutely so. Okay, so there are positives about both of those, but each one of the extremes carries some negatives. What you're trying to do is to get the positives out of both of those extremes without carrying the negatives. And that's where that balanced, flowing phonation comes from. And it carries its name because it has more air flowing through it.
I would think that the airy one would attract attention.
It might, particularly if you've got a microphone. I'm not exactly sure what you mean, Vaughn, when you say it would attract attention.
In contrast to the other voice, it would attract their attention.
It might, particularly if you used it, if you were tight, and then you went gentle, that would draw attention just by the contrast. By the same token, loose, tight, that would draw attention to it. But you know, a good caller will have more than one color to be able to bring to his voice. A jolly sound, a serious sound, an authoritarian voice, all of those are on further down the road. In terms of vocal health, finding that balanced sound is the right one. Okay, so you start with the throat. Here are the ways that you teach this balanced phonation to people. We're going to look at several different ways to do it. You can adopt all of them, use them all interchangeably. You can choose which one you think is the most effective and just use that as your primary way of doing it. Here's the one that I like the best. You start with the sighing sound. Ha, 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 ha. And right about there, you can see that there's a good deal of command in that quality of sound. It's full of sound. And yet, in my throat, it has none of the negative side effects of the tightness. It's just full, commanding, because it is acoustically attuned rather than muscularly pressed into place. All right? Would you do that again with me? You did it last time. Let's do it one more time. Ha, 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 ha. Right about there is where you get there. What did you have to do to get there? What were your observations? Gloria.
I had to push more with my diaphragm. I had to push, have the sensation of pushing.
There was much more activity in your diaphragmatic area. There was more activity, wasn't there? Anything else that you observed? How about the quantity of air that you had to use to make the sound work? Talk about the quantity compared to what you thought it was supposed to be.
When it was relaxed, I used more air than when it was breathy. Yeah.
You had to rev up your engine much more than you ever thought that you'd really have to. So does that raise any anxiety in your mind? Because it certainly will with your callers. When you say, use 3 times as much breath as you're used to using, they're going to say, oh, I can't do that. I'll run out of breath. The thing that I fear the most is that I'll run out of breath. Yeah. What's that?
They did not fear it enough. That's the usual problem.
So they run out anyway.
Air and their sound becomes very thin and very tight, and I'm intentionally trying to do it right now, but they start sounding more and more like this.
Yeah.
Instead of having the full dynamic sound that they should have.
Yeah, but there is nevertheless an anxiety that all of us fear, that we get a little way into our breath cycle and say, oh, I'm out, I've got to conserve, I've got to hold, and so you don't use your breath. And then you get back into that tight sound immediately. This generous breath flow is a little intimidating. It's intimidating because the fear is that I'll run out. It's like these things that you say, how could that be so? How can I have enough breath if I'm using more breath? It is kind of magic. It is indeed kind of magic. There is a threshold of breath that you have to hit in order for your vocal folds to spontaneously begin to vibrate And when you're below that threshold, either you get tightness to compensate for the inadequacy of breath flow, or you get breathiness because there's not enough to activate it. It's a simple law of physics. It's called the Bernoulli effect. When the Bernoulli, the suction is sufficient, the vocal folds will close. And when it isn't sufficient, the air will escape and it will be breathy, or you will tighten down the valve to compensate for it. Those are the options. And so most everybody is below their breath threshold. And you say, well, when I finally get up to breath threshold, it sounds so commanding and so loud. And then you start dealing with the psychology of people who really don't want to intrude on anybody else's life. And you all know, you know how to deal with the psychology of a caller, to say, no, you're not being rude, you're not being overly aggressive, you're not being vain. You may be, but you're not being vain. You know, you'd reassure people to say that what really is needed is somebody to stand up and be a leader. And you don't have to be full of yourself or pompous or authoritarian. You can be yourself, but the square, the dance at that moment needs a commanding person, somebody to be that. And so you're actually being a service. You're actually doing what's right by doing that. And you help people who've been raised in homes where children were seen and not heard, and who learned how to mute their voices and to speak softly and never raise their voice. You know, we're dealing with a whole bunch of life patterns there, and that's not part of my field. But nevertheless, the mechanics of bringing that up to reality, of making the voice commanding, has to do with the flow of breath. Okay, so that's one approach, is just simply to start breathy and intensify the breath over 4 or 5 repetitions until the sound finally arrives at the threshold where the voice works by itself. What does that voice sound like? Listen. Ha, 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 ha. What does that voice sound like? What are the characteristics of that sound compared to the pressed or tight sound or the aspirate sound?
It's richer and more resonant, and louder and more commanding, without having an edge, without making people nervous.
It has all of the positives of the tight, commanding voice with none of the negatives. But it also has all of the positives of the breathy voice, the friendliness, the accessibility, with none of its liabilities, because it has the clarity in the middle of it. It's aerodynamic stuff. Okay, so that's one of the things you have to learn to tune your ears to: tightness, looseness, and balance. Those are really the only options, and some small gradations in there. But nevertheless, you're the ones that have to help people to move from the extremities on either side into that middle ground where it can work. That exercise that I just did is one of the ways that you can do that. Here's another way that you can do it. Ja, ja. In other words, I get a big stream of air going, enough to make an SH. I vocalize the SH and turn it into a j quality, and then I open it into a vowel. Ja. Often, I don't use that exercise as much anymore because people can mistake that one. They get this. Ja, ja, ja. And the minute they go to a vowel, they change their strategy. And then I have to coach them and say, no, you feel the breath flowing through your throat on the sh. You feel the breath flowing through your throat on the sh. Now keep that breath flow the same when you go to ja. Oh, and then all of a sudden they can get it. But some people won't get this. Ha, ha, ha. They won't get it. It'll just go this way. Ha, 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 ha. Because they think that they're supposed to continue to sound breathy. Somehow they won't get it. They'll continue to make adjustments in their throat that will open the glottis wider and wider and wider, so no matter how much air you get coming, it still stays breathy. So that isn't a universal tool, just as the ja is another one that's a little trouble. Now, without talking any mechanics, you see how long I've taken to tell you all this? And all of you are thinking, if I take this much time in my caller school, I'm dead in the water. I just can't go this slow. But I'm trying to give you options. Here's a very fast option that often works. I'm going to introduce you. I didn't introduce myself to you. Hi, my name's Arden. I'm just using my natural speaking voice. You hear that I want Frank to like me, so I'm using that sort of gentle voice, right? So now you say, just introduce yourself naturally. Hi, my name's Arden Hopkin. I want to be a caller, except I'm scared spitless. Okay, now let's say that you were going to introduce yourself to a room of 30 people. Hi, my name's Arden, and I'm really nervous. Now you get a group of 500. I'm an actor on the stage. Hello, my name is Arden Hopkin, and I'm the greatest actor in the world. What did I just do? We all know in other contexts how to use our voices. When we have to present ourselves before a large audience, what did I do? What? You heard me. What did I do? Yeah, but I said I got to make my voice project. Did you hear the pitch rise ever a little bit? Did you hear the breath energy come into it, the support come into it? I've got to make my voice carry, so therefore I'm going to speak up. That sometimes you can just say, use your stage voice, use your commanding voice. And even if you don't feel particularly commanding, pretend. I'm in charge now. I'm telling the world what it needs to know. And my voice just made the adjustments. Everybody already knows how to do that. Except in the moment that they're up with a microphone in their hand, they forget everything they ever knew before and become paralyzed. Okay, so those are 3 different ways that you can go about trying it. And my advice to you would be, over the course of your next several caller schools, to adopt those in rotation and see which one you like the best. Or if you want to be short about it, say, I just got back from a school where I got some instructions. I'd like to try out 3 different approaches on how to get your voices to work right. And when it's finished, would you tell me which one was most effective, which was the one that seemed the easiest for you to understand? And as you go along, you'll start to figure out which of your approaches are the most useful to you. Okay, now, once you get that airflow going, the great anxiety that people have is, I'm going to run out of breath. Now they're ready for a lesson on what to do with breath. Soon as their mind says, I have some anxiety about breath, they're ready to learn something about breath. You teach them about breath before they have a need to know, and they won't remember a thing you say. So you set up the need. This is a really good teaching tool. You set up their need to know, and then you say, oh, do you have a question? Yeah, I'm going to run out of breath. I'm afraid. Would you like some answers? Oh, I really want some answers to that. Well, I can give you some answers. Oh, thank you very much. And they remember those answers. Yeah. Excuse me. So then the next thing that you've got to do is to teach them the process of breathing. The first way is to help them find their diaphragm. Would you all stand up, please? Would you inhale? There are 2 ways to do this. You can either use the little martini straw, thick milkshake approach. You put an obstacle in their way to inhale by making a real small opening and asking them to inhale vigorously, and they will discover their diaphragm, just as you will. Try it. Martini straw, thick milkshake. Can you feel it? Can you feel the expansion at the lower part of your ribs? That's the downward motion of your diaphragm. Everybody can find that. Here's another way that's less aggressive, but nevertheless just as useful. Stand tall. Find that posture that you just found a little. Isn't that amazing? Every one of you, having found it 25, 30, 40 minutes ago, can find it again right now. You just taught yourself a very important lesson, that your callers can do the same thing. It doesn't have to be retaught. You just invite them there, and boy, they go there. Okay, so in that position, now just block one nostril and inhale. You feel the expansion in the same place? Release. Block the other nostril. Was one nostril more effective than the other? Everybody has one nostril that doesn't work as well as the other. And all you have to do is to find that one and ask them to inhale through that nostril, and it's sort of like breathing through the martini straw. Except it's very natural, right? You don't have to work so hard, and yet the diaphragm, you can discover the diaphragm. Those 2 approaches are very effective at helping people to find their diaphragm to inhale with. Question?
You said one nostril breathes more easily, and then I wasn't sure, using the easy one or the
hard one. The one that's blocked is the one that you want to use. All you're trying to do is to make inhalation more complicated, to make the muscle that is responsible for inhalation have to work a little bit harder so that you can discover it. Most people haven't got the foggiest idea what their diaphragm is. It's something in the middle of your body, they think. And so it's so revealing when you actually feel it and say, oh, that's a breathing, that's an inhalation. Good. That isn't the only way to do it. I want all of you to find a comfortable spot to lie down on the floor. No, because Gloria won't ever get up again.
I was just going to say, we'll take all
Okay, we're going to simplify this thing. Do I have a volunteer? Volunteer, come on. Would you lie down on the floor? Thank you. Okay, you can do this. I usually do it with a heavy weight. I don't have a heavy weight right now. And sometimes with my students, I'll take my shoe off. I guess that's what I'll do right now. And stand right on your solar plexus. Okay, Lonnie. I'm going to put my foot right here, right at this is the epigastrium. This is the spot where the ribs part. And you notice that now I'm putting a little weight on you, not much, about 30 or 40 pounds. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Lonnie to raise my foot. Don't inhale, just raise my foot. See how she's doing that? Release it, and raise it again, and release it, and raise it. See, she's pretty good. That's her diaphragm. That's the muscle in your body that allows you to do that. Now, inhale while you do that. Yeah, and you don't even have to work that hard. Just good. See, that's a nut. This is a fairly exaggerated thing that I'm doing right now because she's having to raise an extra 30 pounds on her diaphragm, and therefore she really has to make that muscle work. And lo and behold, you know where your diaphragm is now, don't you, Lonnie? All right. While I've got her here, I'm going to go to the next level on this thing. So raise my foot again, inhale, form an SH, exhale, and exhale, form an SH and blow. But don't let my foot go down at the same time. Keep coming, come on. Make it work, make it work, make it work. Come on, but keep my foot up, keep my foot up, keep my foot up, keep my foot up. Keep breathing. Oh, you stopped breathing, keep blowing. Oh, okay, yeah, I want you to take a breath. I want you to listen. Form an SH. Keep my foot up. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. No, keep going. 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 This is the learned part of singing, and that is nobody's used to having your diaphragm in the low position while you exhale, and yet that's what makes it possible for breath to continue to flow. It's a learned skill. How can you do that? You can't have everybody stand. You can't go around stand on everybody's stomachs to do that. There are some ways to do it. I'm going to teach you a couple of simple ways. I brought my Gideon's Bible with me. Heard a fun story today. You know, who was it that told me this? I don't think John's here. You talk about mixed emotions. This is a demonstration of mixed emotion when your 16-year-old daughter comes home from her first date with a Gideon Bible. Your first thing is, phew, at least he's out with a good guy, but holy cow, a fanatic, you know. All right, I need another volunteer. Come on. Okay, over here against the wall. Everybody come on over and watch this. In the same place where my foot was on Lonnie, I'm going to put my this book. And it's just a hardbound, any kind of a hardbound book. Now lean up against the wall. Now put your feet first. There you go. Now push yourself away from the wall. Now you're using your own body weight. And so all you need to do this is just have a couple of blocks or some hardbound books or some videotapes or something that's firm. And as you do that, you just say, without inhaling, without breathing, push yourself away from the wall. And that the muscle that you use to push yourself away from the wall is the diaphragm going downward. That's the way it should go when it's inhaling. Okay? Now, breathe while you're doing that, or are you already doing that?
I'm doing both.
Okay, so as he breathes, he knows that he's getting a diaphragmatic breath because he's moving away from the wall. The next thing that he's got to do is to form an S or an SH, something noisy, an F, a V, something that you can sort of monitor as you go, and exhale all the way through, but keep yourself pushed away from the wall. Don't let yourself fall into the wall. Now, did you see what his body just did when I told him that? He sort of he firmed up his abdominal muscles. The abdominal muscles are required. Lonnie, did you feel that when you were getting on into the breath phrase? You had to do something to keep my foot raised, and it required you to use your abdominal muscles. And without a whole lot of physiological discussion, you can teach people what the process of support is. This is support. Low diaphragm, raised abdominal muscles as you go through the phrase. Now, you don't have to be grand about this. A caller needs to be able to sustain a phrase not usually longer than about 6 seconds. Every once in a while, it'll go up to 8 seconds, except for the ones that are trying to style by not breathing between phrases. You put a couple of phrases together, and all of a sudden you're looking at 12 seconds of exhalation. Or, in exaggerated cases, maybe as much as 15 or 16 seconds if you're really trying to show off a high note or whatever. Yeah? But you need to have the capacity to go up to about 12 to 15 seconds. Not that you're going to use it all the time, but that extra reserve will give you a sense of confidence that not have you panicked out when you're coming into 6 seconds. Yes?
Do I understand that you want me to keep my diaphragm out
Yes.
while I'm singing?
That's correct. I want it in a low position while you're singing. This is the way whereby you control your breath over an extended period of time. And this is a learned activity. Nobody does this naturally. This is something that will be new information to your people. So go ahead. Inhale. And exhale. Now for the first 4 or 5 seconds of this exhalation, John doesn't have to do anything. There's an elastic rebound that occurs in the lungs as they return to their normal size. And there hits a point, he just passed it, where now he has to consciously expel the air. And in order to do that, he has to tuck in the abdomen. When you guys go up to your rooms today, will you go into your thing and you'll find either, I was looking myself, you'll either find the Holy Bible or you'll find the Book of Mormon, both hardbound. You can use them, right? To go up against the wall and figure out how to do this yourselves, which John is doing. Thanks, John. Okay, let's come on back. I wouldn't make a big deal out of this, maybe even as much as I've made out of it, because they only really have to get good enough so that they can make, in your school, they only have to get good enough so that they can make it through 5 or 6 seconds worth of phraseology. And if this thing that I'm talking about will take you much farther than that. Okay? Any questions about that process? Did I go too fast, or did you understand the sequence? First you find the abdominal muscle, the diaphragm, then you help them find the abdominal muscle. Yes?
I want to know what is wrong with what I've always told callers to do is get in front of a mirror, put your hand on your gut, and when you inhale, push that hand forward. And when you exhale, push the gut in. And I think the diaphragm stands still, but you are keeping your chest up and you're sucking the air in by pushing your gut out of the way, and you're pushing the air out as you're pulling your gut in. What is wrong with that, or
nothing?
Is better than that?
No, nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong with that. Here's another way that you can. I'm going to go there right now. This is so going where Vaughn is. This is a game that you've heard us play before in these sessions. It's called Fat Skinny. You just stand up and you play Fat Skinny. Some people are good at fat, few are good at skinny, but everybody gets to play it. So stand up, please. And the funny thing about this, and this is easy. This is easy. You just create an environment where everybody understands what's got to happen. The one that I've invented for myself is you just step out of the shower. There's a full mirror right across from you. You look at where your stomach is, and everybody knows what to do about that. You suck your stomach. You pull your stomach in. Right? Those are abdominal muscles. Those are the abs that you need to try to firm. The same thing that John was doing, leaning up against... Where are you, John? Yeah. Joe, sorry. The same thing that Joe was doing, leaned up against the wall, you can do just by saying, make yourself skinny. Now make yourself fat. Make yourself skinny. Make yourself fat. Skinny. Fat. Skinny. Fat. Huh?
The beach or the bar? The beach, the bar.
Oh, now that's a good one. That's fun. The beach or the bar? When you're out on the beach, you got your tummy pulled in. When you're at the bar, you're all relaxed. That's excellent. That's a fun one. Okay, so then after you get that rhythm going, the flex, the release, the flex, release, flex, release, then the next time they flex, ask them to exhale. Everybody work out okay, or does that feel backwards to anybody? Okay, here we go.
I'm confused that my stomach goes in and out, but when you had me against the wall, you told me to leave it out and let the breath out.
Yeah.
Now, which do I do, or do I do both? First, let the breath out, and then let the...
Actually, this thing that I'm doing right now is simpler, more fundamental than that which I was having you do at the wall. If Vaughn hadn't raised his question, I would have skipped it. I would have just sort of forgotten to do it. Thanks, Vaughn, for pulling me back on that. So you flex your tummy in, flex it, and let it go. Don't relate it to breathing. Just pull it in and let it out. And pull it in and let it out, and pull and release, and pull, and the next time you pull, blow. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yes, that makes sense. I do that in singing and even in karate we do that. But I'm confused when I have
when the book's there.
Against the wall, you told me to leave it out.
Yes.
And let my air out.
But you notice where the book was?
Yes.
And you notice where you're going in and out?
Yes.
You're going in and out in your stomach area, in your lower abdominals. But the space right at the bottom of the rib cage should stay expanded so that there's that contraction in and under. So you get pressure underneath the lungs by your abdominal contraction. That sends the air out and so forth.
I've always said when you push the gut forward, it creates a vacuum up here, which lets the air come in quickly.
That's exactly right. Okay, so that's another way that you can sort of help people get to the knowledge of those two things. You guys have seen a variety of approaches. Each one of you may gravitate to one or the other, or like I did with the phonation thing, I would suggest that you spend some time trying it out. See which one works the best, which yields the best results. Have a seat. So somebody help me on time. How are we doing? Huh? We're right. Okay. So we've covered the most significant issues. There are some other elements that we didn't have time to cover. I apologize, but I wanted to go slow enough so that we could really talk our way through these two things, which are the most significant things. The management of the breath is about, and how you make the sound is about 80% of the battle. Gloria.
I have just a question that it might be an offshoot, but what I'd like to know is a lot of the classical, I would call them classical opera singers, the gentlemen, have developed huge, like a lot of our callers, including myself.
Yeah.
Is that because of using the muscle so much that it develops?
No, it's an indulgency of after-hours eating. However, I have never yet met, I'm sorry ladies, but I have never yet met a good singer who has a waistline. Because the process of inhalation and exhalation builds musculature through here that leaves the body fairly thick in the waist area. Not fat, but just thick and muscular. And it's a pretty small price to pay. So there's only one other element, and I'm going to just quickly throw it in there, and it has to do with resonance tuning. If I had another occasion, maybe on another occasion, we can talk about how to help resonance get tuned. But as I said, about 80% of it is how you make the sound flow. There is a sound called the primal sound. It is this sound. Ah, ah, ee, hey. It is not tight. It is not muscular. It's acoustical, and it's how you tune the resonance track. Everybody knew how to do it when you were born. Babies have it naturally. But somehow over the years, we lose it. Some people cultivate it. People who sell newspapers on the street corner do it. TV personalities do it. Radio announcers study it very carefully. And it's this quality that you bring into your voice. And it's a little bit tricky. I'll just introduce it to you. Can you all imitate that sound from me? Ah, ah, ah. Okay, that's all we're going to have time to talk about, except that element, above and beyond the breathing, and it looks like I screwed up again, is an important element that can be added, not in the first stages, but in the next stages on down the road, to make a voice truly commanding, but without having to be pressed in any way. Okay, thanks, guys.
Can I have one more?
Yes.
I haven't heard you mention, and that is, don't talk over the microphone, or don't shove it here, but we need to hear the sound that's coming from the nose also, so hold it squarely or at an angle in front of your face so you can hear the sound coming out of the nose and the mouth at the same time.
Yeah, I didn't mention that because I knew you would. Thanks, Vaughn.